Hey everyone, it's Nicole. Welcome to our 12 days of giveaways. Today I thought I would make a couple really fast cards. Sometimes I know I don't have a lot of time around the holidays to make handmade cards, but I thought I had a couple ideas I can make for some really quick cards, so we're going to share that with you today. So all I'm doing here is grabbing a 6x6 paper fad from the Snow and Cocoa line from Crate Paper and a pair of fringe scissors. So the pair I have are from Stamping Up. The American Crafts also does sell them, and some of you might already have them in your sewing stash from many years ago, so it's a good tool to kind of crack out and use up. I've gone through my paper pad, as you can see, and just cut some 1-inch strips from various patterns in the paper pad. And what I'm doing now is just cutting down a tree template. I believe this is, I want to say it's 2.5 by 4, and I'm just drawing from one corner to the middle of the top of the cardstock just to make a bit of a tree kind of template. I'm going to cover that up with all my fringed pieces of paper, but I just wanted to get that set aside. And I've also cut a square here out of another piece of just scrap cardstock, and I'm going to cut a circle and kind of find the center and just trace that around for my other card that I'm going to make. So one card will be a tree and the other will be a bit of a wreath type design. And I'm really not, as you can see, not measuring. I'm just eyeballing it here. This is, again, all going to be covered up later. So I'm not really too worried about having it super perfect. So I made a little bit of like a donut shape for the other card. So now the hardest work for this project is to go ahead and fringe all your papers. When I pulled my papers out earlier, I kind of set them aside in two different piles. One pile was more of the green kind of color family, and the other is just a bit of random kind of like modern kind of colors for Christmas. So I have pink and gold and some of that craft and even some of these white patterns here. Now obviously I have sped this video up. It takes a little longer to fringe than as quick as this is here, but it really doesn't take super long. It's quite easy, and at the end of this you will have quite a bit of paper left over. You could probably make a couple cards here just with a few strips of paper. So these are my more green color family cards, or fringes I should say, for one card, and then the rest are going to be all for my kind of fun tree. So I'm just going to separate those out. And really the only trick here is once you fringe, just as I'm doing here with my pencil, just kind of curving that along that fringed line and layering them up. I added a lot of adhesive to the base of that scrap piece of paper. And so now I'm just, as you can see, curling and layering and as you go. So if you want to use less patterns or colors, you can definitely maybe have like 4 strips of paper, and because it is a small size, you could just trim it down. I wanted a lot of different patterns and colors, so that's why I have so many different choices, but again, totally up to you what you want to do. So I'm just continuing along all the way up to the top of my tree, and then I'm going to trim off along my little cardstock base, I guess you could call it. And then I have obviously little bits left there up at the top, so I'm just gonna trim off a couple and fill in that top area. And that's really it for the tree. Pretty simple there. You can see it's not perfect, and I'm okay with that. I really just wanted a whimsical looking tree. And now I'll just clean that little part up, and let's finish off this tree card. So I have just a simple card base here for the top, or for the base, and a scrap of gold glitter paper. So what I'm going to do is adhere that tree to the center of my cardstock, but I thought, wait a minute, that's a little bit plain. It's a little too white almost, so I decided to grab some of my distress inks out. I have the cracked pistachio color. It's kind of like a fun, I'm not calling it mint, but it's like a teal mint kind of combo. And I'm not an expert with this, but I know my tree is going to cover up some of my boo-boos, so I'm just starting in the middle where it's going to be most dark and just adding a slight little amount of rubbing to add that cracked pistachio ink onto the base of the card. And that's just to add like a bit of a watercolory look in behind. You could obviously do the same thing with watercolor paints. And it's really hard to see now, but you'll be able to see it better in the close-up at the end of the video. So I used a scrap of glitter paper for the trunk of my tree. And now I wanted to add some bits and a sentiment. So there's not a lot of room here on the card for the sentiment, but I have these scrapbooking cards today, exclusive stamps from one of our SCT delivered kits. And there's a really good sentiment in one of those. So I'm going to use that just to run along right there along the bottom of that tree. It actually fills in that area quite nicely. It's perfect. So it's going to grab some black ink here from Close to My Heart and stamp that on really simply. All right, so let's get on to the second card. This one here is a bit of a wreath type shape is my idea. So I decided I liked that distress ink thing here on the first card, so I wanted to do that on the second. This time I have a color called Evergreen Bough, and I'm just kind of eyeballing where my donut shape's going to be and adding distressed ink just slightly in and around that area. I end up later on adding a little bit more, but you'll see that. I did spray it with my mini mister and add some drops of water and then dab that off just to kind of get a little bit of a snowflakey droplet thing there in the back. And then I decided that was good, but I wanted to add a little bit more color. I had a bit of an idea. So I'm adding even more distress ink and then dabbing off with water droplets again. I'm going to go back later and do even more because it needed more in the end. So same thing, I've already fringed these papers, so I'm going to go ahead now and I'm just going to curl them like we did earlier with the tree. And this one's a little different. I end up ripping them into little pieces to work around the edge of my wreath or donut shape, as you can see there. And I only have 3 strips, so it's a little easier. I'm just going to rip these here in half and then end up getting them into even smaller pieces as I get going. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to go around the outside of the circle shape for my wreath or if I was going to do it a little different. So I ended up deciding just to kind of do the same thing where I added a lot of adhesive and then just start with one color and keep on going around and around the ring. Just rotating through those 3 different colors to kind of create a bit of a pattern. And you can either move up or tuck under like I'm doing here. And the adhesive I used wasn't really probably the best. It's not super tacky, so I had a little bit of extra time to wiggle things around and move them around. You'll see they move a little bit. And I'm just going to go all the way around that ring, rotating the colors. And I'm not really super worried at this point about whatever is hanging over the edge. I don't think I even actually trimmed it up later on. So I just left it as it was because, you know, when you buy a wreath, it's not always perfectly circular. There's always bits that are hanging over the edge more than the other. So it's really simple. Just take those scraps, go all the way around, and then you kind of have your little wreath shape. You can kind of smooch things around, wiggle them. And I decided I was going to pop this up on my card. So I'm just going to use some of these foam pop-ups by Scrapbooks by Adhesives by 3L. And I did end up cutting off some of the more obvious squared off pieces of that fringe because they did look a little square when I put it on the circle. So there's the idea there for the actual donut wreath, I'm going to call it. And I'm going to put that here on the center of the card, and one of my pieces fell off, so I'm going to have to adhere that later. And now I wanted to just make sure it's really sticky, so I had to add some dots in behind, some glue dots here, just to get those papers stuck down because the adhesive I used in the beginning wasn't completely tacky. So I'm just adding some to the less sticky parts just to get that wreath kind of down in place. Really simple and really not hard at all, and quite fast too. You know, all you had to do is fringe a few strips of paper in the beginning, and you could probably, if you did a whole piece of that paper instead of a 1-inch strip, you could have a whole bunch of cards. Really simple. So now I have a set of Lawn Fawn stamps here. I love this Noel and these hand scripted kind of words. So I'm going to line this up here on my mat and just stamp that with some archival black ink. And now I'm trying to set to how to finish off this card. So I actually have these really cool doodlebug. These are holly and berries. So I added foam adhesive to the back of the berries. Because that fringe is kind of dimensional, I wanted those to kind of pop inside there. So I'm just adding a few of those holly berries in amongst my card, in amongst the wreath, just to kind of add a little bit of color other than the green and the teal kind of colors that I had going on. And then I wanted to add some of the leaves to kind of poke in behind my wreath shape as well. So I'm just going to add a few of those. They're really, really cute. I love these. These have been my stash. I've been hoarding them for a little while. So now I decided that I still wanted more of that evergreen bough color to the back of my card. So I went back in afterwards and just rubbed a lot of it here on the edges of my card. And then I did that same water droplet thing as earlier where I just kind of tap some water and dab it off. And you can't really see that very far away from the video, but it adds a nice kind of like almost like snowy kind of background to the card. Super easy. So there's my 2 cards. I did end up embellishing this tree one here a little bit more, so let's show you how I did that. I just grabbed some stickers from the Crepe Paper Snow and Cocoa collection, so it goes with the tree, all the papers in the tree. And so just adding some of these little, I think they're like a little bit of a snowflake or a star shape, so I thought I'd put one at the top of the tree, but as you'll see I end up taking it away because it kind of looks a little funny, that little circle up there. There I go, taking it away. And it's all about adjusting and changing your mind, right? So I'm just adding some of these circles. I'm just trying to decide how I want them. I wanted to add a circular element to the tree because it is pretty linear, and sometimes just adding some circles in there makes things a little bit nicer for the eye. So I'm just gonna again use pop dots to adhere all this on. Same reason as I did with the holly on the Noel card, just because the fringe kind of is dimensional. And then I had a glitter star in my stash just laying around, so I ended up adding that too. And this is some gold watercolor paint that I have, so I'm just going to cover up my tree a bit and just flick some of that little gold in and around the exterior part of the tree. And all there's really left to do is add a little bit of bling to my cards. I really wanted to add some bling elements, and I added some stamping as well here, some little dots you can see to the background of the Noel card. Just some little bling tucked in with the holly berries, and same thing here on the tree card. I added tiny blings from Queen & Company onto the inside of those circle die cut cardstock stickers. And that is it for me. I hope you like this tutorial, and I hope you're enjoying our 12 days of